every birder seems to have a story as to why they're a birder. And is there anything you can tell me about the story of what or who sparked your interest in birds?
I grew up always watching nature shows, so Marty Stauffer, Wild America, Lorne Green. I remember New Wilderness, I think the name of the show was, and Wild Kingdom. So I always grew up watching nature shows. That was my thing, and I watched the nature shows. And we have an old set of World Book encyclopedias. So I watched the nature show, and as I'm watching, I'd look up the animals and things like that. So I've always had an interest in animals and wildlife, and I still to this day watch Natural Geographic. I watch all the animal shows. And while everybody else is watching Game of Thrones and those other things,
Sure.
I'm watching National Geographic Channel.
Nice.
So how I morphed into birding, early 90s, I was on a picnic at Calvin College in their little preserve. I remember we're sitting there eating, and I look in the pond, and there's this bird skulking through the water, just kind of standing there for a while, skulk, and then would stand motionless. Just like, oh, that's neat. So just went on with my business. But as I watched, the bird was skulking, stand still, and he'd look down the water, and he'd draw his neck back like an ass. All of a sudden, whack! He'd hit the water, and he'd pull up a fish and have it in its beak, speared it, and then he'd try to manipulate it and swallow it face first, or with the gills pointed backwards so he didn't get spine. I was like, wow, that's pretty neat. So I watched it. We watched it for a while. We kind of like, oh, that's pretty cool. So, all right. And so I went back a little while later, maybe a couple days later, after going to Wild Birds Unlimited, and I bought a pair of Bushnell binoculars and a field guide. I don't know if someone told me to do that, but that's what I did.
Wow.
So then I brought the binoculars and the field guide down back to the pond, and there's the bird again. So I'm watching, I'm looking, and he's exhibiting that same behavior, skulking and hitting that fish. I thought, this is great. And I'm looking at my book. It's not that. And I'm looking. Great blue heron. I'm like, this is so cool.
Wow.
So then I just remember I used to go there quite a bit after I just watched that bird. Then I started seeing other little birds. I was introduced to the, back then, green-backed heron would be there. And I used to sit in those marshes back when life was much simpler and just watch and see the herons, the great blue heron and the green-backed heron and kingfishers. And that's how I got my taste of it. That's what got me hooked.
Nice.
And then just started noticing and recognizing birds.
Along the way, have you had any mentors?
I would say Bill Sweetman has been a great mentor to me. Did quite a few local birding trips with him around Reed's Lake, and that's what really got me, starting to learn birds and learn how to identify birds, because obviously there's a lot that goes into it. He just walks through the woods. He's just picking out these birds. You're like, when I first started, how does he do that? I realized it takes time. You got to put some time in to do that. Yeah. So Bill Sweetman, I would say, has been one of the biggest influences in my life, and I've traveled internationally with him several times.
Okay, yeah.
And just the people I've met birding, birders seem to be pretty accepting of, we're just all birders. So, and I don't do this with anybody else, where you just meet people once or twice, and all of a sudden you're exchanging phone numbers and calling this person to go into the woods with you. I mean, that's kind of weird. But with birders, I have no problem doing that. I have no problem doing that. Can I circle back to something you asked me? You asked me for a funny story.
Sure.
It was McGee Marsh, I think 2014, maybe 2013. And I was there with a friend, and we were birding. And I believe it might have been a female Cape May. And we were trying to figure out what this bird was.
That's
and
a confusing one.
We had a Stokes field guide out. We're looking, and up walks this lady. So what are you guys looking at? It's like, we're not sure what this bird is. And we think she grabs the book. She's looking. I think it may be a female Cape May, but I'm not sure. This is not a very good picture of the book. And I forgot what the exchange was after that. And we asked her, well, why would you say that? She goes, because I wrote it. It was Lillian Stokes. I got my picture taken with her. It was great. Yeah, it's not a great picture of it, but I wrote this book. We're like,
Too funny.
Yes.
Too
Yes,
funny.
yes.